Hey, I'm Matt at Cypress North.
And I'm John.
Today, we're going to take a little bit of a break from all the AI discussion we've had over the past couple of months. And we wanted to talk about the current state of website development and content management systems and what we're seeing with our clients and the work that we're doing. So, for many, many years, we've developed websites for typically B2B companies, and basically all of them need some type of content management system. And for the last 15 years, the dominant player in that space has been WordPress. But lots of new technologies have come out and have become a lot more viable, a lot more capable. And just like everything else, people are always eager to try something new. A big one of those items is what people call headless CMSs. What a headless CMS is a similar concept to something like WordPress, except it's really more of a data repository that you connect to via an API and build your front end totally separate from the content management system itself. That's a little bit different from something like WordPress or Drupal or Joomla, any of these other traditional CMSs, in that there's really no connection between the visual output of where you're entering the information and configuring your site, and kind of the front end experience. And they don't, in the headless world, you can use any front end technology to create that connection between your data and how it's presented on a screen. With WordPress in particular and other traditional CMSs like Drupal, basically, you're both designing and creating the content at the same time. And the CMS is very opinionated in how it presents that information. So unlike the headless version, you're more tied to the structure of the output on the front end than you would be with a headless CMS. The lines are kind of blurred there, and it's a bit confusing because you can use them both in a similar way. But talking about WordPress specifically, we've built probably over 100 sites in it. And it's not because it's the tool that, as a developer, we like the most. It's because our clients like to work in it the most. Do you find that to be true?
I think that, people are just so familiar with it. And especially some clients that have been using it for so long, they might be a little apprehensive to try something new. And many times a WordPress setup does make sense. And, we've seen clients that sometimes, push to go headless, but really the use case for it in their specific instance doesn't always make sense. It's not that it's not possible to use headless, but in many cases, just a traditional CMS is often the route that, makes most sense for their use case.
Yeah, and I want to talk about that, the use cases of headless and where it works and where it doesn't. But first, I want to talk a little bit more about WordPress because it's such a dominant player in the space. Today, it makes up over 60% of all CMSs deployed worldwide. And in fact, it makes up around 40% of all websites in the world is powered by WordPress. So you can't really ignore it. But recently, there's been a lot of drama with the project and the fighting with WP Engine, which is a hosting service that runs WordPress as a managed provider, but they've kind of modified it in some ways and made it work different than the open source version. And the owner of Automatic, which owns WordPress, has started some beef with WP Engine, didn't like that they were making so much money and having so much success on the open source product that he created, and had started a bit of a fight with them, which is impacting the overall WordPress ecosystem in a negative way. People are like unsure if it's going to continue to be supported as well, if it's going to continue to grow the way it has over the years. And there's a lot of cause for concern there. But I mean, it's an interesting battle. I know we've all read about it quite a bit. And my personal take is I don't understand what's happening on the WordPress side. Like, you created an open source tool and now you're mad that someone else is profiting off the platform.
Yeah, that whole situation was kind of a mess. And I think it it put a bad taste in a lot of people's mouth. And I know that, back when all that was happening, there was a lot of chatter about, possible, alternatives. We have seen a lot of new tools come out and, new platforms that people are starting to explore.
Yeah, and this battle with WordPress has really spurred that acceleration into exploring new tools. People who are on the fence about WordPress have then, jumped over it, and they just don't want to deal with this problem anymore.
Yeah.
And it has had real impact. I mean, they've come out and said, Automatic has said that they are going to slow down the innovation of WordPress and restrict the number of releases they put out each year because they want to focus on their for-profit side of business now, which just seems like a complete mindset change from WordPress's perspective. They were always the open source tool, kind of a model for open source software. And now they're saying, I want to make money the way these other guys are making money using the work that we've, put in to create this ecosystem. They're profiting from it. I'm jealous. Now I'm going to take my toys and go back home with them.
Yeah. I think like part of the reason it became so popular to begin with was because it was open source, because it was, free to use. And, if they do at any point ever take that away, I don't know that they would, but if they did make it a total proprietary thing at some point, I think that would discourage a lot more people from using it. And at that point, if it's a paid product, people are going to start comparing paid product to paid product. And, I don't know what the outcome of that would be.
100%. And we've always been big advocates of avoiding vendor lock-in with our software, and even as an agency partner. Like, we don't want to put our clients into something that they're tied to either via us or a software system. You should own the work that you create, and you should be able to bring it wherever you want, and someone else should be able to work on it as well. And that's what's great about WordPress, at least today, is that you can create something completely custom on it, but it's all standard PHP development, best practice stuff. Any other PHP developer in the world can take over your site and continue to develop on it. The source code is portable. The database is portable. You can host it yourself. You can move hosting providers easily. That's like a big factor in why it's so popular and why we like it. Not necessarily the development experience. And the product has been around so long, and their ecosystem is so big. That is like their number one selling point, is the size of their ecosystem, meaning plugins basically that you can add to your site easily to accomplish a goal without spending a lot of money to get it done. And I think that's the reason why we continue to see clients moving or keeping on with WordPress, because it could just be way too expensive and time consuming to recreate functionality that you get for free, basically, with WordPress. Basically, anything you can think of, any integration you might want, is just a plugin install away. It might be a small fee for the plugin. It might be free. But if you want to connect your ERP system, you want to connect your marketing automation, there's pre-built plugins for everything already, and you can be up and running quickly. And we like to help our clients achieve their goals with as little friction as possible. And something else we like to do is to kind of always say yes to our clients when they ask for something, if it's a business need, instead of saying no because it's a technical hurdle or it's too hard or whatever.
And another point to make about some of those, the community being huge and all of the plugins for WordPress, is that, some of the automation tools, or even certain authentication methods, like we could develop the solution for that in, whatever CMS someone wanted. But especially if a client doesn't have a huge budget, sometimes it makes sense to go WordPress solely because those tools are already built, and, you can kind of, plug and play, drop them in, and, something that would take us quite a bit to make is already available, and, you could get it, whatever it costs in the WordPress plugin store.
Yeah. Yeah, and this isn't meant to be like a pro WordPress talk. It's just like the most popular, most common CMS out there today. Um, the fact that it's been around so long and has been through so many iterations is kind of a negative on it at this point. Because the ecosystem is so large, it's really restricted their level of innovation and bringing things into like a modern standard because they're trying to support so many legacy systems and maintain backward compatibility.
That's impressive.
Yeah, I can't believe they've squeezed this much out of maybe one of the worst database schemas I've ever seen in like a
Yeah.
global product.
Yeah.
They've optimized it as far as it can go, but it's hitting its limits. I mean, there would be so much positive to gain by throwing away all the legacy cruft and starting fresh again,
Yeah.
even if it's a breaking switch over to version, let's call it like it's WordPress 7 starts fresh and everything behind that has to stay on a lower version or something.
Yeah.
There'd just be so much benefit to that. And I think it would change how people view it because there is this kind of sense, especially in enterprise, that WordPress is not an enterprise content management system. And we hear that all the time. And we work with our clients to kind of explore why that may or may not be true. And in our experience, just like most systems, there's good and bad implementations of it. And WordPress it's got to be one of the most abused systems there is. There are so many bad WordPress sites out there.
Yeah.
But you can make it really good. You can have amazing success with it. And we run some very large enterprise sites on WordPress with great success, great speed, crazy customizations, integrations all over the place. You can really do anything, but just like anything, it could be done well, it could be done poorly, and unfortunately, the open accessibility of WordPress has an outsized amount of poorly done stuff that kind of skews everyone's view of it.
Yeah, and that's one of the we talked about how it's just kind of standard PHP development. The community is large, and that's great. But one of the negatives is with that large community, there's a lot of people doing stuff poorly just because they might not understand the proper way to structure their code, or they're not following best practices. So there is a lot of crud, but you just have to know how to kind of sort through that, which isn't always the easiest thing to do.
No, it's not. And as PHP being one of our areas of expertise at Cypress North, we've brought proper software engineering practices into WordPress development. We kind of have our own process where we bring in different coding kind of mindsets and patterns into WordPress development to make it more like software development and make more enterprise grade outcomes.
Yeah, I think that we have a pretty modern, software pattern that we follow that I almost can't even imagine doing WordPress without that. It's just the open community and people kind of, being the Wild West out there, having that structured, opinionated pattern that we use, I feel like makes a big difference.
It does. And that's something we have to explain to our clients pretty often is like, not all WordPress is created equal. Here's how we do it to make it enterprise grade. And it can be done that way. And it can be done that way very well.
I think with all content management systems, sometimes you have clients that they think it'll give them the flexibility to do whatever they want. Like they'll be able to insert content wherever they want, style it however they want. And they view that as a positive. But in some cases, I would say probably in many cases, it's actually a negative because you want a consistent web experience. You want, all your titles to be a specific size. You want things to make sense from a user interface perspective, and kind of having an opinionated design, both in terms of the user interface and structuring the code so it's maintainable. I think that, that can really enhance your experience with a CMS like WordPress. But that's not to say you have to use WordPress. You can kind of have that set up.
And that's kind of a good segue into where headless is helpful and where it fits in, because in like a perfect world, from at least like a developer's mindset and a designer's mindset, it would be great if you could enforce these strict rules into like how things are presented on the page, the ways you work with the content, keep everything consistent, and kind of put guardrails around like how you build web pages. That's typically not the reality, though.
Yeah.
Clients always want this one little edge case, but then they want a million of them. And
Yeah.
if you don't give them the ability to make those little tweaks themselves, then, they become frustrated with it and they blame the content management system. But then we give them, full control of everything. Like, you can adjust every component on the page, all the padding, all the margins, like it's like too much. Like, now you can have so many variations of the same block on a page that it can become very inconsistent and hard to deal with.
Yeah, that's a good point. And not only from a UI perspective about it becoming inconsistent, but that's a classic case where you can really start to add technical debt, depending on what the request is. If they need to embed a certain thing and that it requires some JavaScript, but then you got to make sure that's always up to date, and something else relies on that. That's not, it can just lead to a series of big technical debt.
Again, with a traditional CMS like WordPress, you don't have to use it this way, but the most common way it's used is that when you're putting the content into the administrative area of the site, you're basically also getting the front end of the site along with it. And you design the front end alongside with the content itself in the back end. In a headless CMS, you basically only think about the data and what content you have, and you don't even think about how it looks or how it gets presented until later. That's like a separate discipline, basically. So what that allows you to do is to focus more on your content structure and be more, I guess, responsible or constrained with like what type of content you're accepting and allowing to be presented on the website, which can make things a lot more consistent. But what that also means is that you need to really think through and plan how your site is going to work and what that content is going to do for you ahead of time. Otherwise, you're going to be constantly changing the headless data repository to fit what you were trying to do on the front end, and you get frustrated there as well. In our experience, we've helped a bunch of people migrate away from WordPress into a headless CMS because they felt like that was where the world was going, or that it was a more enterprise grade solution, or that they thought it was going to solve some problems that they had with the way that they manage their website. And what we found and what they found is that it's not all it's cracked up to be as far as flexibility and the promises that a lot of them make to you. We commonly hear that, oh, we won't need a developer any longer to make these changes. We can do it ourselves in the CMS. Not really understanding that everything still needs to be developed. If you put data into a headless CMS, you need to program the output of that data visually, no matter what. And you can only plan for so much. And there's always going to be new things you need to do, which requires more development to activate it either in the headless CMS or to allow for it on the front end of the site.
Just maybe as an example, if you had a headless CMS where you were storing like property information, like pictures of a home, the address, anything about a house, and then you wanted a feature where you could show it on a Google map, and you think like, oh, I just need to add a field for longitude and latitude to store it in the headless CMS. Well, if you want to show that on your front end, you need a developer to implement that now. So, as long as you understand that you're still going to need a developer, that situation works. But if you think you're getting all that for free, you're absolutely, you're not getting that for free.
Yeah, and because the backend headless data repository is technically not connected to any front end, you're usually limited in the type of visual variations you can give the end user. So it's typically a marketing team who needs to manage the content and make changes to the website. And they often want to do things a little different each time. Like they might want a new background color, or they want a new module or something like that. Unless you completely fill up your headless CMS with different options that are tied to your front end, you just can't do those things. And once you do make those changes and provide all that visual flexibility in the headless CMS, you're now defeating the purpose of a headless CMS, and you may as well have just been on something like a WordPress. So the big selling point of a headless CMS is that your content can be reused across multiple channels. That's the drum they've been beating, is that you put content in one place and you can leverage it on a mobile app, on a website, on a storefront, on another website that needs the same content. But in all the years that these have been running, have you ever seen one of our clients actually use that feature?
No, and I think that clients that do have information that they're showing on multiple websites, it's in a system that they don't even think of as a headless CMS, but really it's serving the same purpose, where it has an API that you can call to get data. I think that there is this trendy kind of mindset, like, oh, headless is the way to go. But I mean, certain things do make sense to go headless, and the content of a website, especially if it's just one specific website, I don't understand the benefit of that.
I agree. I have yet to see a case where two separate websites need to use the exact same content in the same structure. So that, to me, just makes it so that a headless CMS, like the selling point, just isn't there. There are some advantages to it. Speed is one of them. You can develop a front end that is faster than WordPress pretty easily. But on the downside, there's no standard to what that front end is and what the technologies used are to build it, which means that when you go to transfer it to another vendor or set up different hosting, it's on a completely bespoke setup each time, using different styles, different JavaScript frameworks, different everything, which makes it a lot harder to be portable and transferable between developers or agencies. To me, there isn't a huge advantage to these headless systems. I think they can be worked with well, especially if you are still under the assumption that you're going to need a developer to make these things happen. You can make a headless CMS work great for you. But it is kind of constant evolution, just like every website is. But then there's a whole other world of website builders, especially in 2026, where in the past we've had things come out like Squarespace and Wix that were great for very small websites, personal brands, where you didn't need to know how to write code, and you can kind of visually build a web page. And those kind of opened the door for anyone to make a website that looked pretty good, but they're not suited for businesses or for any business of scale, really, unless you're like a very small storefront. Have you tried working in any site on those platforms?
Yeah, it's usually like you have a lot of flexibility in terms of the UI. Usually there's some kind of like theme you can download, and there's a whole marketplace of themes. But then once you need to do something that requires custom business logic, it's an absolute headache to work in. It's not that you can't do it, you can, but those types of platforms aren't necessarily developer first platforms. It's more of a, hey, I don't really know programming, but I need a website, and I want to get something set up quick. And the development experience is more of an afterthought or just not like a first class developer experience. So as a developer, when someone, comes to me or comes to us with a site built in one of those platforms, I'm always, a little hesitant with trying to make promises that we can deliver certain requests because it might be possible, but the budget might, it might be out of their budget because of how you have to actually implement that.
And the visual page builder style of those sites, especially like Wix and Squarespace, it seems like it's going to be helpful at first because you can drag things around, you can drop them on the page, you can resize them. But anyone who's gone through that knows how frustrating that experience is, especially when you try to keep a consistent style through different pages and different page layouts. You're just wrestling with these visual controls where you got to grab the thing and try to adjust it, and like everything gets out of whack and the settings are all over the place. And it's really, I think it's more frustrating than anything, but it does give you some good, quick, out of the box ways to get like a decent looking site if you're willing to slog through the setup of it.
One thing I want to mention is, we've been talking about a whole bunch of different platforms. And from our perspective, we're coming from the perspective of a web development agency where we're working with some big enterprises. And usually we're not working with too many like small clients. Small in the sense of, they don't have a big operation or like complex business logic. Like if you're just starting your own store, like just selling, whatever, if you got into woodworking and we're selling some cutting boards or whatever, where you don't really need a ton of complicated logic or anything like that. These other kinds of tools will definitely, you could use them and get a shop set up. But once you start having, more complicated business logic, it's tricky to get it to work in these systems that are built, I think, for, kind of everyday people just doing, small amateur kind of sites.
Yeah. Yeah. And I think that's where they fit in, is that if your site is really just to get you off the ground, or if your website isn't really important to your business, those tools can be fine, especially if you go into it thinking that you'll throw it away and start over if you make it, like if you grow.
All, these platforms can get you a site that looks good, and, it really is just simple content management at that point. But again, once business logic comes into play and you need, complicated interactions between, different systems, it becomes trickier.
Yeah, and Shopify is a good example of like an accessible system like that, which is much more capable once you get developers involved, and it has a robust development platform. But it's easy to get up and running with a storefront that looks okay. You can use one of their starter templates. You can move some stuff around, and you're off and running, selling stuff. And that's the important part, I guess, is the speed to just getting where you need to be. But at some point, if you get bigger, if you have more success, then it's time to start over and think through it properly. And with any of these development tools or any of these website builders, the biggest factor in building a good website isn't the actual end product. It's how you get there. And that is the reason why we exist, basically, as a development agency, is to start with the strategy, the discovery, the planning of how your site is going to work to achieve the goals you're looking for, and backing into the development. And how you implement that could be any way, but without the planning, you're really going to struggle to achieve like the goals you're actually after.
We're always happy to make recommendations from a technical point of view. Like some clients have a stack that they work in. They're a .NET shop, and it just makes sense to pick something in that space. But without a plan, it's tough for us to to make a recommendation, because if you need a robust content management system, we're happy to build that. If you just need a static site that you're using, for whatever purpose, we're happy to build that too. But without that original plan of what the site is for, it makes it a little tough for us.
Yeah, and our clients kind of run the gamut from some who are super active modifying their sites, changing content, adding content, restructuring content, to people who launch their site and never touch it again. And you can't really know who's going to be in either of those buckets up front because everyone thinks they're going to be actively working on their site forever. But in the end, a lot of them don't. And once the site is up, it just stays that way for a very long time. They would have been much better off with something simpler like a static site generator or something of that nature.
It really comes down to, wanting to help them both in terms of simplicity on their end and budget on their end. And,
Yeah.
we don't want to spend a fortune building a really complex system that they're never really going to use.
Yeah. And kind of a new wildcard builder tool that's out there today and has become pretty popular is a site called Framer. And we've both explored that. We see a lot of talk about it. It's really a pretty cool take on like the visual web page builder. So it's kind of like a much more advanced Wix. Their pitch is that they are more developer focused, but still geared towards an end user that can create a site on their own. And they offer some very neat capabilities and much more technically capable framework for building a website. Like they make it seem like you can do anything in it. And from what I've seen, you really can because they offer both APIs and custom modules you can develop. Plus, their visual page builder gives you so much control over the layout and the configuration of each element that it's really like it's like an HTML and CSS code generator more than it is a web page layout builder.
We've been going through some of the documentation and watching some of the videos on it. It seems very powerful. It seems awesome, but I also think that it still requires a skill set. It's not hey, I need a website, I'm going to build it quick using this. Maybe that's the case if they have some just straightforward templates, but if you want some complex animations or, even looking at like how you can define collections of pages and group them together, like that's still a lot of knowledge you need to know. It seems very capable, but if you don't have that skill set, you're going to struggle through, that entire process.
Yeah, that's my exact thought too. You couldn't give someone Framer that's just an average person and have them produce anything that makes any sense. It's so capable that you need to be like an expert in Framer or really know like how coding works because then it makes a lot more sense. But without that, I don't think it's any better than like a Wix or a Squarespace because there's just too much control for the average person.
Yeah. Yeah. And then watching some of the tutorials that they were showing for like certain, button animations or card animations, when they, at the start of the tutorial, when they were going to show what they were going to do, I knew in my head how I would do that in code. But then watching them do it in framework, it's like, oh yeah, I would have never figured this out in the tool. It's another skill set that you have to learn.
Yeah. So. And plus the guy's like, oh, watch me do this really quick. 600 steps later, he built this amazing thing. Like it was really impressive that he could build it all visually, but it was by no means straightforward or quick. Like there legitimately was probably over 100 settings that he put in there to make that one little feature work.
Yeah. And it's awesome that you can do all that in that tool. Like that's super impressive to me. It's just, like we said, it's another skill set. It's not hey, I need a website quick. I have no skills, just I need to build something. Like I don't think it's that tool.
Yeah. Yeah. Where I see it being really powerful is for a good designer to become like an expert in something like Framer, combined with Figma or the other tools that are used because they tie together nicely. So you might be able to cut out a development company if you have a designer who's also an expert in something like Framer. They might be able to build a really impressive website for you if you don't have like crazy integrations or business requirements.
Yep.
One last thing I wanted to talk about is the direction that the visual design of websites are headed. in the recent past and going in through 2026. Are you getting the sense that everyone is designing their websites to look the same?
Yeah. I feel like every year we see certain trends that pop up. Like, I don't remember what year it was, but there was a trend where like everything was big, bold text on a page. And then, that we built a lot of sites where that's what people wanted. But then down the line, they were like, oh, we noticed like we have to scroll a lot. We need more above the fold. And it's like, well, the trend that you wanted was this big, bold text. And yeah, everything keeps going in these like cycles of the same kind of patterns.
Yeah, now everything to me looks like it's AI generated. And a lot of them are like just everyone makes a homepage example or a landing page example, and they all look the same. There's like the exact same color palette or font treatment or animations or structure. I feel like we're just headed into this dark era for design where people don't appreciate good design anymore, and they just, if it looks cool, then they're good with it, and we're just losing all the creativity.
Yeah, and it's interesting too, because when you do see a site that is, not the norm and is impressive, it really stands out because there's so much of the web that, it's just following the same patterns. Everything is kind of like a blur. It all looks the same. So I think if you do have a great website design that stands out, that's going to be a big plus.
Yeah, I agree with that. Like handcrafted, well done things are going to make a comeback because we are going to be buried in slop for the next several years. And the people who stick to doing like really good, focused work, I think they're going to come out ahead in the long run just by having something that is like real.
Yeah. Yeah.
And developers haven't helped this UI trend either, because we've worked to standardize a lot of the tools that we use to create visual designs. And because of that, it's natural that everything looks similar because everyone uses Tailwind now. Everyone uses Shad CN.
Yeah.
It's like all the same UI toolkit for every single site, every single piece of software you use. It all looks the same. And I hate that. Like, it's nice that it all looks good now. And it's all working well on mobile and it's responsive. Interactions are standardized. Like, that's cool, but it's so boring.
Yeah. I think like the benefit with something like Tailwind though is at least it's just providing you utility classes to kind of style your site. I think back to like the days of like Twitter Bootstrap,
Right.
how like there was a point in time where every site was like a Twitter Bootstrap site.
And everybody groaned after a year when they pull up a site and like Bootstrap. Like you can just identify it in 1 second.
Yeah.
And that's how it is kind of with Tailwind, like starter kits now.
Yeah, the starter kits. Like I'm starting to notice a lot of people that are just using the starter kits and, aren't really customizing much, which is fine. The starter kit looks fine. But like I said, if you have, those websites where it really has a unique creative design, they really stand out now.
Yeah. And it's only going to get worse. And this isn't an AI talk, but just by default, some of these models, like I think I started a project in Gemini from scratch and I just said, make me a landing page with this information on it. The first thing it did was install Tailwind in the starter toolkit, and it just made it using that. So that's going to happen for all these people who are just like vibe coding a web page.
Yeah, for sure.
Back to the headless thing just for a moment. One other big factor with the headless CMSs is that almost every single client that we've worked with that has took the leap and moved to a headless system, we've helped migrate them back to a traditional CMS after they tried it out for a year. And that seems to happen over and over again, that they were sold a dream, it didn't work out in reality, and they end up moving back to something like WordPress because it just works. And in the end, the goal of any website, at least in business, is to market and sell a different product. Like your website isn't the product in most cases. And you need to be able to do those things easily and quickly. And WordPress, Drupal, sites like CMSs like those, they just let you do those things without worrying about it. And you can focus on what you're really trying to do, which is sell your product or service.
Anyone that tries to sell you on a specific, methodology for something, um, and they are, you know, promising something like, oh, if you go headless, you're going to save money. You really need to think about what they're saying. Why is it that you would save money? Because you could get your data in more places. Do you even need that? If the answer is no, you're not really saving any money. So you really have to question the motive of, why someone is telling you to build something in a specific way. And, I think we do a pretty good job explaining to our clients, we might give them multiple recommendations, share the pros and cons of each, and kind of work with them to come up with a solution that is really tailored to their exact business needs.
Yeah, and that's really important, is to have a good technical partner like we try to be for all of our clients, who can tell you these things can work for you, but here are the trade-offs for each of them, and help you decide on the right fit. And ultimately, it's what the end user, the client, the people working in the system are going to be most comfortable and most capable with, not what is technically coolest or best or what the developers prefer.
Yeah.
It's also thrown around a lot that headless is enterprise and something like WordPress is not. And that enterprise tag sells a lot of companies on going full in on them because it just sounds like it's going to be better. Um, but I would say, and I would encourage any company considering making that switch to pilot it first, make a quick proof of concept, and try to actually work with it and see where the hurdles are, because people just get blindsided by what they can't do anymore in these systems that they're just so used to in a normal CMS. Like if you want to put some basic SEO stuff in, if it wasn't built to support that, it's just not there. Or if you want to add a redirect, that might not be possible at all. There's just no redirect supported in some of these systems. You want to add a marketing tool or an email, like I want to put MailChimp on there. There's no extension or plugin for that. You have to go build something. So it's just headache after headache if you don't have a dedicated team to support them. But like I said, like there's a different fit for everyone, and the right company could find success in it if they've got the right development support and they know what they're getting into. Um, but for others, there's really nothing wrong with any of these CMSs out there. I mean, some I think are a little better than others, but in the end, it's just what works best for your team to be able to move quickly and easily and support your real goal, which is selling your product or service.
Throwing around the term enterprise, sometimes I don't even know what people mean when they say that term. And, regardless of which CMS we're talking about, CMS A or CMS B, you'll find plenty of big enterprise people using those CMSs. So there's a lot of flexibility in terms of what you're picking. You just have to know why you're picking that, why it is the best solution, or maybe not even the best, but just a good solution for your specific business. And we can help talk through some of those pros and cons with clients, and I think that makes a big difference.
Do you see any changes in the near future to how companies are approaching building a new website or revamping their current website?
Well, I'm concerned that there's going to be a lot of AI slop in the near future, just from seeing, how some of the trends are going. And the big thing that worries me there is like security and privacy. Like, there's all these privacy laws that, you now have to follow or make sure you're compliant in. And I don't know that the AI generated stuff is following any of that.
Certainly not.
And, we've seen stories where, someone is trying to start a SaaS product and they do it through AI, and then, the database gets hacked and, they, lost all of this customer data. I just saw one recently where I think someone had exposed their public or their private Stripe key, and, it was charging their customers all this money. And so I worry about that. In terms of design, kind of going back to what you said, I'm hoping it's not more of the same starter kit looks and then we get some unique websites, but we'll have to see where the year takes us.
Yeah, I think Framer's making a big push for a lot of places. There's big companies that build their landing pages using it. I think it's a really strong contender for future development when you have like a small subset of pages you just need to put up quickly and make visually entertaining and functional. Um, so I'm excited to see where that goes. But full blown websites that are like important to your core business, I don't really see a lot of change in content management systems in the next year. I think WordPress is still going to be the major player. I think we are going to still see competitors come out, but they all lack the one thing that WordPress has, which is the ecosystem, which makes it so hard for anyone to jump ship for. So my hope for the future is that WordPress continues to evolve and at some point modernizes completely on a completely new code base and database structure that makes it a lot more relevant in today's world for website development. It seems like design is going to be a mess this coming year with everything looking like a SaaS product, whether it is or not, just the same style homepage and a lot of the same looking websites coming on a variety of platforms. And I would imagine that WordPress is still going to be probably the biggest deployment out there for new sites this year.
Yeah, I think that's probably right. I think WordPress will still be at the top.
Yeah, but I'm excited to explore other ideas and different technologies that come out and see where some of these headless products go. It'd be great if there were better use cases for them, but the market just seems so niche for those. But there's plenty of them, and they seem to be having success. And it's all about just making it work for your business in the right way. Okay, that's it for this month. If you have any thoughts about what you're seeing in the web development world or the design world in this coming year, let us know. Until then, we'll see you next time.